All right, now this is giving me the right one now. The first one I did was not give me uh, that I can call people in. So thank you very much for joining again. My name is Paul-Esupofo. I'm glad to be here again, and I want to thank God for this part two. And we're going to be having Brilliant Pongo as part three, the ramping up with him on why documentation and why do we have to document some things in nation building? Why are we keeping records in nation building? Why are we really putting some things for the next generation or generations to come to do some things? So that is why tonight is going to be wonderful. It's going to be awesome. And we're going to be having it great tonight. So that's lovely to have such things. Lovely to really talk about documentation. And I talked about it last week briefly. And also, if you have any question, feel free to comment, feel free to talk about it, feel free to really want to make sure that my head is not okay, beautiful. So feel free to talk about it, feel free to let me know what your mind is. Feel free to let me know what your mind is. And that is, let me quickly invite Brilliant Bongo. Okay. So, yes, he's here now. All right. Here now, my brother is here. He's here now. So I'm adding him, connecting. Yes, good evening, sir.
Evening, how are you?
I'm great.
Good.
How are you too?
I am doing well.
Well, last week we are so sorry. I know. I apologize.
My apologies. Let me start by proffering my apologies to all those that were waiting for me last week. I miscalculated the whole thing, and my phone battery died way before 9 o'clock, and I had no charger, so I couldn't communicate, and there was no way for me to get hold of you to let you know about that. But as soon as I charged up, I think it was a bit late when I finally got hold of you. But I'm here today, and I hope that we can make up for lost ground. Is there a slight delay? I think the network is the network is a bit broken. It's breaking up. Okay. The network there is a bit of a problem. I don't know whether you can hear me clearly because you just broke up a little bit. If you could just repeat your question.
I can hear you clearly. I said tonight is why documentation in nation building.
Okay. Oh yeah. So why documentation is necessary in nation building?
Exactly.
That is a very broad and a question that it requires a lot of answers. But I will break it down into let me break it down into four things. Nation building itself requires a narrative that is told from the perspective of the nation itself. So there's identity, right? So nation building is necessary in nation building because it is that which provides identity to the nation. It is that which gives the sense of self to the nation. It is also that which gives vision to the nation. It is also that which brings pride to the nation. And if I can add the fifth thing, if you don't tell your own history and wait for others to tell you of your own history, they may distort your history and give you something that leaves you thinking you are inferior, or you are not as important as you are. If you to look at Nigeria, for example, there are a lot of things that you may have you may have, but many things that you may have lost as a nation due to colonialism or colonialization. Because when you're colonized, what they would have done is that they've tried to break down your traditions, your cultures, and everything else, and try to get you to acclimatize to their or take in what they were bringing and forsake your own. Now, if that is not documented, if you have not got people that went back and tried to find like oral history as to why did we do this, what did we do as a people, and how we lived as a people, we will only know how we lived as a people from the side. The story will be told to us as the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren of those that were colonized by the colonizer himself. So he can then cleanse up all the things, the atrocities that he committed, and just give us all this, that there were a few people that resisted. There was never anyone that really did not want to be colonized. They all welcomed us. But maybe our forefathers died fighting to maintain their land. So there has to be some way that, or events, because what we are documenting today forms the history of tomorrow. Tomorrow, what we are doing today, it will be history. So a documentation of events needs to be put down accurately, so that people are informed of their past. I mean, it was the great Bob Marley that said that if you don't know your history, you don't know your tomorrow. So we need to know where we are coming from and who we are.
Your tomorrow.
Yeah. So if you don't know your history, you don't know your tomorrow. So we need to know who we are and where we are coming from. And that is what builds the sense of identity. That is what builds the sense of self-confidence that some would have, because they know who they are. If you are coming from a tribe of kings, you know, and you carry yourself as such. You carry yourself as a king because you know you are a king. But if you don't know that you are from a tribe of kings, you would never carry yourself as a king, and you would never know that you are a king, because that's the thing. So identity, when we make documentaries, particularly for nation building, it gives us an identity, it gives us a sense of self, it gives us a vision as to, we can see what our forefathers were trying to achieve. We can see what our fathers were trying to achieve. We can also remind ourselves of what we are trying to achieve. And that is something that the generations that come tomorrow, our children and their children's children, can see what we are trying to achieve, the vision of what we are trying to achieve. Because most of the goals that we have set for ourselves, some we will achieve, some we will not. Because as a nation, because as individuals, we can set goals and achieve them very quickly. As a nation, some of these goals are projected way into the future, but they have to be built up. They have to be to have people that carry them on, because they have been well documented and we know what it is that they want. I'm from Zimbabwe, as you can see my flag behind me there.
No, I'm from Nigeria, as you can see my black, green, white. I'm just joking.
Yeah. So if you know the history of Zimbabwe, you would know that it is one of the first nations in Africa to take land. I mean, South Africa is doing that now, appropriation of land without compensation. Why? Because somebody documented it that way, that the land was taken by force. So the settler community, the white settler community that came into Zimbabwe and took land by force. And they never bought it from our grandfathers. They never bought it from our great-grandfathers. They took it by force. So this is a narrative that carried through the generations. So our fathers fought to liberate Zimbabwe and reclaim the land. We are beneficiaries today of a free Zimbabwe that has got its land back. But of course, it came with contention. But yes, the thing is, it is something that had to be done, because we understood the position in which we are in, because we're informed by our history that had been documented by somebody. So it is very critical, and it is very important for documentaries to be put together, for things to be documented. So the job of a journalist, especially in terms of nation building, is to give the nation a good, a report what is currently taking place accurately, so that it informs those that will come later. So our reports that we do are not just for today, but they also inform those that will read them tomorrow, and even 100 years from now. They will see what you have documented. They will see and know that in 2018, this is what Nigeria was like. This is what was going on in Nigeria. This is what Buhari was doing. They will show you him traveling to England for medical assessments. Yet there are hospitals in Nigeria. So people would then start asking, what makes him go to England for medical attention and not Nigeria? So that is something that is being documented right now. So all these reports that you see that is traveling abroad for medical attention is something that it's an indictment on the Nigerian health system by their very own leader. So, tomorrow you say, but why would he go there? We've got competent doctors in Nigeria. Why would he leave Nigeria to go elsewhere? So that is a documentation of events that has happened, that 10 years from now, people will get it. But why does this happen? 15 years from now, people look and think, if it's continuing to happen, that every leader that we have in Africa is leaving to go to Europe for medical attention, yet we have doctors that have trained in Europe and come back to our nations to practice, what is wrong? So if we have to correct something, we correct that because we are looking at history that has been documented, and we're looking at events that have been documented and making comparisons with the now. So we can't keep saying in 1980 they were going to Europe for medical treatment. In 1990 they were going to Europe for medical treatment. In 2000 they are going to Europe for medical treatment. In 2018 they are going to Europe for medical treatment. So that means there's something wrong, fundamentally wrong, with how we are running our systems. And if our own leaders are looking at our medical systems and thinking, well, this is not good enough for me, I have to go somewhere else, how would it be good enough for us? So all this comes through documentation. So when we make documentaries and report on things that are happening on a day-to-day basis, there are some certain threads that will start to pick, and we can follow that, and they can tell a story over a period of years.
Beautiful. In fact, for me, I learned a lot of things from history, because my father happened to be a storyteller. He was a storyteller. He loved telling stories and all that. But I want to ask you, what do you think is influencing some leaders who are saying they should scrap history, even as a subject in the secondary school or in our schools today? Do you think it's healthy, or are they trying to hide something?
It depends what type of history they are teaching. I was educated in Zimbabwe, and I think for the first 2 years of my high school, I did what they called African history. And in that African history, I learned a little bit about the struggle that Zimbabwe had to get independent, and all the formations of the ANC in South Africa, and all the sorts of things round about Southern Africa. Yes, that Nigeria, when Nigeria got its independence, and Ghana and Kwame Nkrumah and all that in the first 2 years. And then the remainder of my high school, I got into studying European history. So I learned more about Hitler. I learned more about the Treaty of Versailles in France, and all the treaty of policy of appeasement and all those other things. I seriously think that as long as we are teaching history that benefits me as a person that is learning about my nation, because I learned more European history than I did history of my own nation in school. I had the good fortune of having a father just like yours that was a good storyteller. My father was in the military. He was a military man. He had fought in the war, and he wanted to tell us exactly what.
Your father must be telling a story, because military people, they like telling stories.
Yeah, so he had to tell me why they went to war and what sort of things were happening. But that didn't sort of, when I was looking at the history books and the African history that I had learned, there were certain things that I was thinking, you know what, that's missing from this. That's actually missing from what we have been taught at school. Because the struggles of these liberation heroes or liberation soldiers, those that fought for the liberation of Zimbabwe. I mean, the whole thing was not, the story is yet to be told in full, because there's somehow that there's a limitation, or the information that we are given is limited. The unfortunate part, though, again, for us, for me, as a Zimbabwean, we tend to learn more of our heroes when they die than when they are yet alive. So right now we can have a person like
that is everywhere in Africa. That's everywhere in Africa. I wrote something some years ago. I said yesterday's story is today's history. Today's story will be tomorrow's history. So do it well, so that it's not being distorted. Make sure you are giving it to the world, because that's why when we're doing media, or when we're in media, we believe that it's whatever we document that the next generation will run about. But that's why I was looking as if hope is not political, to hide history, or to not let people to talk about what they have gone through, or not to allow them to really experience what is going on. I don't know, because I was just
there seems to be a deliberate attempt to try to withhold the real truth. Because this is what I'm saying, that we tend to think that there are certain things that should not be spoken until the person is gone. So I was watching today the former American Senate and presidential candidate who stood against Obama, John McCain.
Okay, McCain.
So John McCain is a war veteran. He has an outstanding history that we started sort of learning. But this is already in the public domain. Before he even died, we knew about this. His story had been told. But the trouble that I have is within the African countries, we seem not to celebrate our heroes until they die.
When they are alive.
When they're alive, we don't talk about. When he's gone, that's when people will tell you, "Oh, he used to do
this."
He's
the best man ever lived.
And you're surprised. Sometimes you're even surprised that, you know what, we never even afforded or accorded this guy the respect that he deserved, because we didn't know of the things that he did. You're only telling us now that this guy was he contributed immensely in the liberation struggle of Zimbabwe. He did this, he did that. This was a guy we just walked past all the time. We never even, as journalists, went there to try and tap into the knowledge that he had or information that he had about a certain thing. And the other biggest challenge that we have, particularly in Africa, is that those of us that have the knowledge to write and compile these documentaries don't seem to do it in the time that we are given. There is something that happens. You might find that right now you are focusing too much on the current affairs, current things, and there are people that have knowledge of things that happened. I think I saw a picture today of the oldest couple, of the oldest twins in the world. I think they're in Nigeria. They are said to be 120 years old. It's two twin sisters. Well, if I was around those people, I'd want to know what has made them to live so long, and what was it like when they started, when they were young.
That's it.
What was it like? What were the changes that they saw happening in Nigeria? So they still have first-hand information, right? These are people that can give you oral history, as you know, for the last 20 years, first-hand experiences that they had with all these things. 120 years is a long time. So if they can just go back 100 years, Nigeria 100 years ago, what was it like? Because 100 years ago, they were 20 years old. But all we are focusing on is the fact that they are the oldest living twins. Here's two people that can give you and corroborate a story and say, yes, this was that, and they can even remind each other. So there's much more that can come out of those two, because they can bounce off these ideas and even remind each other, remember when this happened, and the other one will say, yeah, I remember that. But if it's one person just giving you a story, they could get something completely wrong, and they have no one to cross-check that with. And so when I looked at that, I thought to myself, this is a perfect opportunity to actually say, tell us about this, and they can remind each other. And much more will come out of these two, because they would have lived most of their lives together. I mean, it was fascinating that even at 120, they're still putting on the same clothes. So, you know, like, that's an African thing, isn't it? That when you have twin kids, it's everywhere. Actually, I've seen it here too. That you give them the same clothes. They just have a set of clothes that are all the same all the time. But that's an opportunity that I'm talking about, that, you know, documenting something that gives us information about things, and have that sort of vision to ask those that have seen things firsthand to give you this information, because it will be pointless to talk about these two and say, well, they lived for 120 years, and then if God decides to take them, he takes them without them telling us the story. We have not documented it. It's the biggest thing that I was talking about, that the ones that are our leaders, they never document things themselves. They don't write books. So you can find that there's no documentary. They don't have to write the books themselves, but they can get somebody to do a biography of their life and tell. You know, I would like to read a book about Babangida. Yeah, I would like
Ibrahim
to read about Ibrahim Babangida. I would like to read a book about Abacha, Sani Abacha. I would like to read what their lives were about, because we seem to just know them in office and we don't know anything outside what they did. So how are we going to learn? How are we going to learn from even these people, because we have not interrogated them to find out who, how, and why they lived the way they did? We have seen
let me come in. I have some stories. Recently, I came back from Jos, and I discovered that there is this Usman Danfodio story that many people don't talk about. And one of the things about, please, noise is much, please, the noise is getting much, please. So the Usman Danfodio, he was having this, he uses white horse, or he uses horse to fight, to conquer a lot of people, because he happened to be a Fulani man, but he conquered a lot of Hausa land, but was unable to conquer Jos, because, not Jos, Plateau. Plateau was surrounded by mountains, and horses don't walk very faster on mountains. So the warriors, the Plateau warriors, were hiding behind the mountains to fight back. And once they see from the mountain, they would have seen Usman Danfodio coming from afar off. You understand? And recently I was talking about our Toyen in drama world, in drama ministry by Bamitale. I said nobody has ever thought of writing something, a very strong story or a very strong book on him, even right now. We have a lot of scholars, nobody writes about. You understand? A lot of things that people are doing and people are like, wow, oh. Then another thing here is that when you're asking people for their information, they will ask you, what do you want to use it for?
Yeah, that's the thing.
This is necessary. And for us believers, for us as a kingdom person, and that's why sometimes I keep on talking about the stories, one of the things that happened, and keep on talking about it because many times when I was younger, when the things are happening to me, you know what I do? I write it down fresh. And when I'm coming out to talk to people, I look at those things and I say it out. Like this training school now, this is the 12th year we've started. How do I know? Because I wrote it. I was surprised. In fact, many of my people were surprised when I brought the first handbill, the first flyer in 2006. It was as fresh as if it just been printed yesterday. And I was like, wow, because people don't understand the power of documentation.
Yeah,
people
because
seem to know you more when you document.
I did.
But my question to you, I want to
I
ask you a question.
Okay.
I want to ask you a question. What is the peculiar thing in Zimbabwe that is different from Nigeria or different from other countries that has not yet been documented at all?
I would say that I think there's not many things that I could that I could say are different, but what I've seen is that Nigeria, right, has documented a lot of events, and in a way they might have tried to dramatize these things, but they have embedded, or they've ingrained this sort of stereotype in all of Africa that maybe was a stereotype that the rest of Africa held of Nigeria, because I've not seen too many of these Nollywood films, but the ones that I've seen almost have the same theme of witchcraft and this and that and that, and so that cements something that it's a stereotype that was there, and now the Nigerians are playing that very stereotype in their movies. So you almost think, oh well, is it a stereotype or is it a real thing that happens there? Because they all seem to have the same sort of theme, almost all the ones that I've watched so far. So I would say that somebody must kill someone, and then there's all these things that will come, and so the peculiarities that are there are that perhaps Nigeria plays to these stereotypes, and there's always the thing that everybody, like we're talking the last time, that everybody thinks, okay, all Nigerians are crooks, and there's a lot of 419s and what's and all sorts of things. It's all schemes that have been cooked up in Nigeria and exported to the rest of Africa. So that's the thing that they have. Whereas Zimbabwe, on the one side, has tried to push this idea that they are the most educated people, but yet they have struggled to even change. I mean, Zimbabwe has not even got its own currency at the moment. So it's something that you then think, you know what, we push something, we caught on to something, and we're told, okay, this is what we are. And then we pushed it to the world, to a point that the world almost believes that, oh yeah, these are the most educated people in the world. In Africa, we've got the best education system, we've got that. But what do we do with it? So that's the thing that, if you look at the economy, if you look at the political system and all that, it doesn't seem to reflect what we are saying. If you go into Nigeria, with the biggest population, with all the oil, with a lot of wealth, but if you look at the streets,
million people.
Yeah, if you look at the streets and everything else that goes on in Nigeria, it doesn't seem to reflect that wealth in minerals. This is the same. The two things that I'll say are the same for Zimbabwe and Nigeria, is that these are two countries that have been endowed with a lot of mineral resources. But the two nations seem to have failed to translate those mineral resources into wealth for their own people and better living standards for their own people. So this is why we're saying earlier on, when our leaders get ill, they are flown out of the country to go and get medical treatment elsewhere. Why would that be? Because you know what, I've seen an advert talking about bringing business to Zimbabwe. And one of the things they say there, they say that Zimbabwe is the jewelry box of God. So there's no mineral that you can look for that is not in Zimbabwe. The only thing that we have not discovered so far is oil. But everything else, every other thing, that's what you have in Nigeria. But if you look at the streets and the infrastructure and the way people are housed there, it does not reflect. Because if you go back into the Middle East, if you go to Saudi Arabia, go back 50, not even 50 years, go back 40, 20, 35, 20 years, 30 years ago, you will see that they had not developed to the state that they are now. But once they discovered that they are a power in the production of oil, they managed to change their country. Look at what we have now, Dubai, that whole city.
And they also have a new Dubai. Can you imagine? When you have a Dubai, they also have a new Dubai. Please, let me quickly appreciate Debbie Price. Thank you for joining. Bongza Bogani Muzini Putini, thank you very much for joining. Thank you so much. And every other person out there that we really appreciate you for joining us. This is a special drama film school online where we have interactive session on every Saturday, bringing different brilliant hands and to really talk about different topics at a particular time. We go into politics, we go into biblical worldview, Christian biblical worldview, we go into areas of journalism and different areas to balance, even sometimes that kind of a creative thinking, bringing the joy to everyone. And I'm having here with me Brilliant Pongo from Zimbabwe, and but he lives in the UK. Now, Brilliant, let me, for documentation sake, who gave you Brilliant? Were you the one that gave yourself Brilliant? Or it's a coin word? Or what is the meaning of even Pongo? I'm interested. Let's start from you, because why documentation is necessary. I want to work on it.
Well, well, that's something that a lot of people ask. I don't know what inspired. I don't know what inspired my father. My father was just inspired to call me Brilliant. Wow. Pongo was the name that my great grandfather. My great grandfather had that name.
1, 2, 3,
and so
generations.
four. I was counting up. He was Pongo gave birth, and of course, like I'm on the fifth one there. But my fourth generation, grandfather back, his name was Pongo. And so part of the family, because our family grew so big, we use that name Pongo, and some don't use the name Pongo. They use Munyoro and all the other things. But that is something that is a family name, and has always been. So a lot of people tend to think, okay, so where is this coming from? Where does Pongo come from? I don't come from the Congo. I don't come from DRC. I come from Zimbabwe.
Just like my name, some name is Ria.
Yeah.
So to be from Ria family. So that's just.
Yeah. So going back to the real deal. Coming back to the real deal.
Yes.
Your question was on.
I want us to repeat a bit before we round up tonight. In nation building, what means of documentation will you suggest to the world? Is it drama? Is it filing? Is it pictorial? What means do you think it will last longer? What means do you think it will last longer? What means do you think it will last longer in this documentation? If you have said, and we have said that it's necessary to document, what means do you think it will last longer? Or what means do you think we can diversify? Maybe the people are not thinking about it.
Right. I think all avenues of documentation or making documentaries are necessary because they complement each other and they work in different ways. There's a certain group and audience that they will all bring to an understanding of what is happening. Because if you look at there's an academic way of actually documenting stuff. There's research that can be done, and people will record, like historians would write. That's more academic. That's an academic fashion of documenting events. And then there's drama. I think drama for us in Africa, drama and poetry have always been a best way of documenting certain events. So something tragic happens, there will always be poets that would recite poetry about that particular incident. And what then that does is it records that horror or that terror or that joy or because it could be anything. It could be a disaster, it could be a very joyous thing, and poets would put together a thing that they would recite as poetry. So right now we see also an infusion of drama, that people can play certain events, but when you dramatize certain events of history, there are certain things that would be added and certain things that would be taken away to make it something that can be performed, creative. So the certain truths are lost or certain truths are twisted when it becomes dramatized in that fashion. So in a lot of ways, pictorial documentation. I love photography. I was just going to show you a few of my cameras there, but I think I'm not going to be able to do that. I love photography, and I think, if I move, because I've got my earphones, I won't reach it. If you look at pictures that are taken, they are very good for documenting certain things. So pictorial evidence of things that have happened. So you take photos. I'm fascinated by pictures. I look at pictures of the liberation struggle. I go back to Zimbabwe. I look at pictures of the liberation struggle. I see people that were bombed, people that were, some of them are very gory pictures, but they do tell a story, because when you take a photo, you freeze the moment and the emotion that was there. So you can revisit that and you can look at the picture and you can sort of see the carnage, the excitement, or whatever it is that was there. So the emotion that was there is, the feeling that was there is frozen into a moment, and it's permanently frozen. So you can look at that. I mean, there are iconic pictures that we have seen. One of the most iconic pictures that I have seen is of a little girl in Vietnam. That was when they dropped the napalm bombs, and she got burnt on her body, and she was running naked there, little girl like this, and all the soldiers, the American soldiers, are trying to get her. That image, when I first saw it, I just knew that this is a special picture. Somebody took this picture, and it probably is a big picture. Maybe everybody in the world knows it. And indeed, a lot of people knew it. When I started doing journalism, I realized that that picture was used as an iconic image. There's also an image of one guy in he goes in front in Tiananmen Square, and he goes in front of those military tankers, and he stops them without anything. He tries to stop that image. Somebody captured that picture. And that picture became an iconic image. To this day, it's an image that is used as a sign of defiance. That no matter how big the army is trying to come after you, you can still stand up for yourself. So that is the image that I see when I think of standing up against something. So that guy, we don't know what his name is. Nobody has ever recorded what his name was, because I think soon after that they bundled him away, and China was, it still is in a lot of ways, a bit restrictive with regards to democracy.
Yes. Just like you said, Nobody knows. At the beginning, nobody knows the image many of us put in the church as an actor in Nigeria for Jesus. You know,
That's the thing.
came out, everybody's turning me to Jesus. I'm an actor. And everybody's using my image and they put it in churches. And they, Father, we thank you. And this is Jesus. And the guy came out, I'm not Jesus. I am just an
Yeah, because
actor.
there are certain pictures that just become iconic. That there's a certain message that they just carry. I mean, today there are other images of people like Che Guevara. You know, you just know Che Guevara. A lot of people will see Che Guevara and they'll think of Cuba, but he was not even from Cuba. But they'll think about that because he worked with Fidel Castro at some point, and a lot of people would associate him with that part of the world. So there are certain things that just become iconic. There are certain stories that just catch the attention of the world. If I think of stories from Nigeria that have caught my attention, and there's a guy from Nigeria that was called Ken Saro-Wiwa. Right? Ken Saro-Wiwa, we all know about this story of Ken Saro-Wiwa, and you wonder, why do I know about this? Because it's such an iconic thing that was done. Whatever it is that he was standing up for, he made it global. So this story is known, that this is a man that stood for something. And now people would know the name and would want to know the story. And the question is the story documented accurately?
Yeah,
People will see the image of Che Guevara, and they'll try and find out, who is this guy? I see this picture everywhere. But is the story about this guy documented accurately? Is it documented, adequately?
Yeah. Before we leave tonight, because of the students and we're running up tonight, they will still have their final exam tonight, graduating tomorrow. I discovered something. Part 1, part 2, we have been able to trash out some things while we need to document things, and why even tonight we've been able to talk about things. One of our courses in communication talk about 7C of communication that I think is applicable while we need to document in the nation building. Because if people have said, like, let's use film as an example. I'm a kingdom filmmaker, I'm a faith-based filmmaker, I'm a Christian filmmaker. I do Christian film. I do to win souls, to impact nations. And I discovered that almost every part of the world we have been to, it is voodoo, witchcraft, and they know Nigerian for. Oh, they're killing people. If you go to Africa, they're going to kill you. There are witches and wizards that are going to kill you. And right now, even by the time some of our films in the time past came, we begin to put some contemporaries. But I still see some myths. I still see some heretic message that are not strong enough. I don't know whether you get me. Heretic message that are not strong enough. Hallucination that are not strong enough. But if things are not well documented, I remember during Emperor Constantine, the history record that when the apostles died, and there is no issue, they call it Dark Ages. I don't know whether you know about Dark Ages.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, when Dark Ages came, there was nobody that related to the disciples. Nobody could link with disciples. Disciples were gone and no record anywhere. So people are picking the Bible on the scroll beat by beat to gather information. So when Emperor Constantine came up, he came up to be a Christian and he was able to influence a lot of things in Rome. And the Roman Empire was a very big, like a world thing. Now, people knew this, but there's some distorted thing. On this platform, some years ago, several months ago, I was doing the Black inventors. I later discovered that a lot of inventions, a lot of inventions were done by Africans, but they never mentioned Africans.
Yeah.
A lot of things were done by black Americans or black Africans, but their name were removed because somebody bought their patent. They couldn't pay for the patent at that time. They have the idea, they couldn't pay for the patent at that time to get approved or license, And these are the things that I felt, if these things are put together as a believer, the life of Christ was put together in the faith. What we are doing right now is history tomorrow. Just like I told you, one of the things the Lord ministered to me, say yesterday history, today's story is today's history. Today's story will become tomorrow history. So do things rightly, that people can do that. On the closing, sir, I want you to tell the younger generation. You know, I love younger generation too much. I keep on telling you. What do you think should be our motive? What should be our motive in documenting history in nation building? What should be our motive in documenting it?
Right. I have a way of looking. My philosophy is onward and upwards, because we have to. I said my philosophy in life is I just have to keep moving onward and upwards.
Okay.
Yeah. So here's the thing: the way that I can equip myself to move into tomorrow and the day after tomorrow is to understand what I did yesterday, which is basically the same thing that you are talking about. So what we need to do, especially for the younger generation, is to understand what is happening today. For you to actually get to understand what is happening today, yesterday needs to inform you of where today is. Yesterday needs to inform you of that. So information is very, very important. So history, learn about what happened yesterday. The only way you can say we have improved is if you understand what was done yesterday. Because you can't improve on something that you don't know. You can't improve on something that you've not seen. So you need to know and understand yesterday, which is basically why I alluded to the fact that, you know, all these African leaders are leaving and going to get treated elsewhere. How do you then develop Nigeria? What are the first things that we need to look at to develop Nigeria? We need to look at this. Why do we pick on those things? Because if we look at what has been documented in the past, we see a recurring problem. Now, the importance of documenting things is not necessarily just for you. Sometimes in life, you plant trees whose shade you will never enjoy. So you go and build bridges, which you may never cross, but you build for generations that are coming. So when I plant a tree, I can plant that tree, and that tree may take 50 years to actually grow into a massive tree that gives proper shade. And by the time that that tree is giving proper shade in the park and people are sitting under it, under a bench there, on a bench under the tree, I am gone, long gone, dead. But I have left something that can benefit others. So when you document, you're documenting so that those that come after you can read into what was, so they can develop a better tomorrow. So it is very important for the youth, for the young people these days, for the young generation in our days, to understand that we need to develop, we need to move onward and forward, or forward and onward. But for us to do that, we need to go backwards a little bit to understand where we are starting from, what it is that we have today, what was yesterday, what is today, and then how can that help me shape a better tomorrow. So all this comes into play. The nation building and importance of documentary, because when we started, the question was why documentary is necessary in nation building. And again, I'll reiterate the 4 points that I made, that it's good for us to have an identity. So it gives us an identity. We know who we are because we are told who we are. So how can, even in scripture it says, how shall they know unless it is told to them? So for you to know that, and when there's no preacher, for you to know that your name is Paul, you didn't just wake up and you just said, my name is Paul. Somebody told you, your name is Paul. Your name is Paul. They had to keep telling you that until you internalized and you realized that when this sound, Paul, is said, I need to turn and see because they are referring to me. So now here's why it is important for us to be able to have an identity. I identify as a Zimbabwean. You identify as a Nigerian. Why? Because that is how things have been done. This is what you've been taught. Now, a sense of self. Who am I? Comes in again at the back end of that self of having an identity as, because we can have national identity. As a nation, this is who we are. As a nation, this is what we do. How do we get to the point of saying this is what we do? We get to the point of saying this is what we do because we have seen and it has been recorded over and over that this is how we live as Nigerians. This is what we do as Nigerians. This is what we, even what you eat. It's something that you say, this is a traditional dish. How does it become a traditional dish? Because somebody has documented it as that this is what they eat. This is the staple food here. We didn't have, in Zimbabwe, we have what we call sadza, or I think, I don't know what the equivalent is. It's made out of corn meal, and it's a very delicious, same consistency with mashed potato, but a lot better than mashed potato. So you eat that. I think I forgot what my Nigerian friend was telling me. They have something similar to that, but it's made, they mix cornmeal and cassava. And they create that. But then we didn't have all these things before the whole colonial thing and the whole movement from people that were coming from South America and all that. We didn't have maize. So somebody can document and tell us exactly when we had that. So how traditional is the traditional food that we're saying is traditional? How traditional is the Nigerian dress that you say this is our traditional dress? How traditional is it? Because we can go back, if we look into the documentation of things and how things have been documented, we can see when you started making clothes and when those came, when fabric came, when cotton came your way. We can see when. So how traditional is traditional? Because, is it something that was brought to us? We look at how we're dressed today. This is Western style dress, isn't it? Because this is not, but how long, how did our people, how did your forefathers, how did they dress in Nigeria? They probably didn't have, I've seen all the headgear that people have in Nigeria, and those what do you call, some guys have these throw over things over their shoulders, looking very expensive. I've heard some Zimbabweans call that the $50. It's like a it's like a thing that you just put over there. So there's, and we call it Nigerian dressing. But how Nigerian is it? So we can just start saying, okay, maybe they started dressing that way in the 1900s. But before that, what was the Nigerian dressing? So when does Nigerian dressing start? As far as we know it today, when does it start? So this is why it's important for us to understand history, because and then once we understand that part, we understand why it's important for documentary and documenting all these things. So that's why the point that I'm trying to labor, that we can trace something back and say, well, but it's not really Nigerian. It was brought from somewhere else. And then we took it upon ourselves in 1916. But because we've been practicing it for the last 100 years, we've now claimed it to be ours. Because we didn't have fine cotton and all sorts of things that we did. We had screens from animals and all that, and we designed it our way, and we had our own way of dress. So there's something that I can call authentic dress, authentic Zimbabwean dress, authentic South African dress, because at the end, if it's not skin, it's not authentic.
That's right. And I really want to appreciate it so much, because like I mentioned in communication, one of the training we do is when you're saying something must be clear, it must be complete. And you made mention of correct. It must be correct. It must be verified. And you know, viewers at home, everybody noting us, we really thank God that we can have a very wonderful discussion tonight. You know, I won't deceive you. This is history already being made. And without what Mark Zuckerberg has done, I can't be in Nigeria here and also be in England with my brother, you know, live, and we are talking. It's part of the thing, whether we like it or not. Mark Zuckerberg did it, and
Yeah.
at the time, it was not available for Android users. It was only for iPhone users, and along the line, it became available for Android users, and many of us capitalize on it. And I want to thank God for every one of you. Please, whatever you are going to give out, documentation is good, but do your research and verify sources. We've mentioned that in part of the previous
Yes. Yes.
previous thing.
Yes.
Verify the
But you
source
see,
and be sure that
you're a filmmaker, and I like the fact that you've used the example of Mark Zuckerberg. If you look at the story of Mark Zuckerberg, some people may have known the story of how he got to start the whole thing to do with Facebook and all that. Some people may not have known that. But here's the thing, there's already a film made about it. So it's permanently told. The story is now permanently told. Whether it's accurate or not accurate, that is the narrative that will run. So there's something about how filmmakers can tell a story and give it their own, twist, that this is how it happened. Because you tell your story from your point of view, from how you saw it. So this director or whoever it is, somebody writes a book, and then somebody adopts that book into a film. Sometimes they just write it from straight up without even making it a book. And this is the same thing we see with Zuckerberg. There's a story of how he started the whole thing. So that's the kind of thing that we're talking about, that all drama, pictorial, film, all these can be used as tools to document events and cement them into history, and they are there. When we want to come back to them, we can go back and find out, okay, when Nigeria got independence, what was the day like? You have to go and look at the pictures. You have to go and look at the videos of that particular the first Independence Day of Nigeria, the celebrations. What was the emotion like? What was the feeling on the street? So all that can be sort of captured in pictures, in films. You can go back and relive those moments. Even though we were not there, we could see what happened. So that's the importance of documenting. But sometimes people just document the main events. But there is also need to just carry through the day-to-day to sort of see the things that have been going on. So newspapers can do a good job of that. But the trouble with newspapers sometimes is they always carry the negative stories. So if you go into newspaper articles, and you go into the main newspaper in Nigeria at the moment, and we go back to the first of last month, the 1st of August, you may find that the main stories were the political stories, the crime and all that. So what has been documented there is not the best things, it's the worst things that have happened. So if we then rely on newspapers to sort of try and paint a picture of what happens in the whole country, we are far from truth, because we are only focusing on the negative. Because a lot of times news is very negative. It's very dangerous things that have happened. There's been a killing, there's been this, but that doesn't reflect the picture of the full nation. There's some places where people are actually living. Yeah. So that it's just a microcosm of what takes place, and when you document things. So that's why we need to involve all sorts, because drama may want to involve the happy side of Nigeria. Newspapers are focusing on the sad things that are happening in Nigeria. Film wants to incorporate, the imaginary and the, bigger picture of things. So if you then put all these things in perspective, they shape something, they tell you something about a greater picture and a greater nation.
Yeah. Thank you so much. We have been listening to a brilliant Bongo, and from the conversation you can discover the brilliance, actually brilliant. And we'll be in touch by the grace of God from time to time. We're going to be in touch, and we'll be communicating from time to time. And I know you are. I hope to see you in Nigeria soon. I hope to see you in Nigeria soon by the grace of God. And
Yeah,
thank you so much.
it's been a busy past week, but yeah,
Yeah.
I'm working at it, and yeah, I'll be coming to the great nation of Nigeria. Um, and I hope to meet a lot of people there. And I learn languages. I learn languages very fast.
Wow.
But I do that through music. I do that through music. So I do that through music. I can listen to a song, and it will take me about 3 times to listen, about 3-4 times to listen to it, and I can sing that song. Wow. But after times I don't know what it means, and so I start asking, well, what does this mean? What does that mean? What does that mean? And then I start to pick, okay, so this song is talking about this. Okay. But then I can sing it along, and you think this guy knows this language. I have no idea.
That's music.
The power of music. So music is also another way of documenting things.
Yes, I wanted to mention, but it skipped my mind again. And this particular lecture, or this interactive session tonight, is a brilliant one that people can reckon with. And I want to thank God for your time. I know you are very, very busy. Thank God for your time. Thank you so much. Greetings to your family and the children. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
And everybody,
my pleasure.
You have a wonderful day. Bye-bye right now. Don't forget, go to our YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube, and let us enjoy God together. Have a wonderful night. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.